Public CEO Report is a podcast that provides insights about the public sector and public policy for the benefit of decision makers and leaders powering our communities. I'm your host, Ryder Todd Smith, and today we're joined by Kevin Woodhouse, the City of Pacifica's City Manager. Kevin, welcome to the Public CEO Report.
Thank you so much, Ryder. Really pleasure to be here.
Well, it's great to have you on. I've enjoyed the opportunity to work with you on a couple projects, and always delightful and thoughtful and great big picture perspective on things. And it's certainly clear to me you really care about the community of Pacifica and in your day-to-day work. So I'm excited to get a chance to talk with you because one of the first chances I had to work with you was on a local coastal land use plan. And I really hope we get to talk about that today. But before we do, I want to give context. So tell us a little bit about Pacifica, where it is, and your work there as city manager and how you end up in the city manager seat for that matter.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for that. And before I start, I just want to thank you and Tripepi Smith for all the work that you do across the state for local government. So it's amazing.
Thank you.
I've worked in local government for 34 years, started as an intern with the city of Mountain View. 23 years later, I was left the city as the deputy city manager, went to an organization called the Mid-Peninsula Regional Open Space District on the San Francisco Peninsula for 4 years as assistant general manager. And that's when the city manager position in Pacifica had opened up. Pacifica is a coastal city, just under 40,000 people on the coast of San Mateo County, just south of San Francisco. And it was a great fit for me. And I've been city manager here going into my 8th year. So it's a dynamic community, complex ecosystem, as I like to call it. And I think we'll talk about some of those coastal issues further here. So,
yeah. Let's jump into that. So you are the chief executive of this beautiful seaside town just south of San Francisco along the coast. You are subject to the California Coastal Commission and a lot of what you do. So, which is then partly related to, or entirely related to, this concept of the local coastal land use plan. But let's just first paint that picture especially for the people who listen to this that are not familiar with local government. Talk to me a little bit about life as a coastal city in your partnership with the California Coastal Commission.
Yeah, absolutely. So the all coastal communities in California are subject to the Coastal Act. There's 75 or so coastal cities, and every coastal city has to have what's called a local coastal plan or program. And it is required by the Coastal Act, and it helps define land uses and policies that pertain to the coastal zone, which is a designation from the Coastal Act. In Pacifica here, it's everything that is west of Highway 1, and it's a significant portion of our community, a significant portion of our neighborhoods and commercial establishments are in the coastal zone. And so it's really akin to the general plan for the coastal zone. That's what the local coastal plan is. And it's essential planning document to bring certainty for policies and, as I mentioned, land uses, and to fulfill the Coastal Act and the goals of coastal access and coastal resource protection in a way that fits our community.
So I think a lot of people just mostly think of the California Coastal Commission involving some form of pollution abatement and prevention and a focus on access for the public to the coastline. So this idea for some folks, certainly the average person who's not in local government, and maybe even for city professionals who are not exposed to coastal communities, I mean, in many ways, at times, the California Coastal Commission is sitting side by side with you in land use planning policies and decisions. Is that fair?
Yeah, that's fair. And I would add that one of the benefits of a modernized and certified local coastal plan is that it really retains local control for the city in those decisions that can be appealed to the Coastal Commission. But without a local coastal plan, the Coastal Commission actually gets to make land use decisions. They have a lot of regulatory authority in the coastal zone under the Coastal Act.
This sounds eerily similar to housing elements and builder's remedy.
That is an analogy that I've drawn on a lot in
Yeah.
recent years.
Okay, so this concept of the local coastal plan, was this from the foundation and the founding of the Coastal Commission, or where did this really evolve from, and why does every city need one at this point?
Yeah, so it is part of the Coastal Act, a requirement for all coastal cities. Our local coastal plan was from 1980
Hmm.
and was woefully outdated. And that's why over 10 years ago, we began the process of updating that. Let me say that again. Over 10 years ago, we began the process of updating this very complex planning document and just recently achieved certification. And so much has changed in, the last 45 years, right? So the 1980 plan just did not address, sea level rise, did not address climate change, did not really address adequately other resource protections or, coastal access and environmental justice, et cetera, economic vitality, all the things that cities have evolved in over the last 45 years. So it's just, again, it's a really critical and complex and difficult document to update and get certified with the Coastal Commission.
Why now? I mean, as you noted, the last time you had revisited this sound like was 1980, you said?
That's right.
So
That's right.
45 years old. What is there something prompting either Pacifica specifically or coastal cities in general to have to update these plans?
Yeah. Well, I can generally answer this and then maybe be bit more specific about Pacifica. So we know in cities and in development patterns, clear and certain policies are really critical to development interests. And, whether it's someone that's remodeling a house or a larger commercial development, they want clearly defined requirements, entitlement requirements, et cetera. And so the old plan didn't include that. And so there's this big ambiguity, particularly if a project is appealed to the Coastal Commission. Well, what is the Coastal Commission staff going to recommend? What's the Coastal Commission itself going to decide? So it's really critical for cities and in city building and city managing to be as clear and transparent about the policies that apply. And that's what updating your local coastal plan achieves. We also recently, specific to Pacifica, in the past 3 years, had undertaken this enormous Plan Pacifica effort, which entailed a comprehensive update to our general plan, which was also 1980 era vintage, needed to be updated comprehensively. Another very difficult, long-term process. We achieved that. In addition to other planning updates, of course, our housing element, we're completing the rezoning phase for our housing element and a specific plan that applies to our main downtown area, Sharp Park in Pacifica. So all of these land use and policy documents are the fundamental building blocks for the future of cities. And it's essential to modernize them, use best modernized science to make decisions and inform the policies, and just be clear about what the requirements are and therefore what the options are for folks that are looking to remodel or redevelop.
So partly, I take a few things away from that. Number one, bringing clarity to the land use and construction kind of parameters in the coastal zone. In some ways, bringing that clarity and getting it certified by the Coastal Commission, I assume means that if it's good to go and consistent with that plan, then there's no need to go to the Coastal Commission. And that brings a certain level of certainty, which should theoretically trigger investment. Is that fair?
Yes, that's absolutely right. And if a project were appealed to the Coastal Commission, the Coastal Commission having already certified the document and the policies, they may not have grounds to overturn the project. So it brings certainty to that process.
So I guess, yeah, that's then, so this is an economic development effort. And it also, without a local coastal plan that's been certified, it sounds like developers would find themselves, they could get something in the city and then they'd have to turn around, go and get through the coastal commission at the same time. And then suddenly it's two big opportunities to fail on doing a development project.
That's right. That's right.
Interesting.
Yes.
So I assume every city needs to get a local coastal land use plan, or is that, I mean, it sounds to me like they're all required. Is that correct?
That is correct. And I mean, if a city doesn't have one that's certified, then I think the law, lets coastal commission have authority over more. But there is new state law that is requiring all cities to update their local coastal plans to, for climate change, sea level rise, adaptation, et cetera, by, I believe the timeline is 2034. And as I mentioned earlier, this is a very comprehensive and difficult process, takes many years. And so, I think we're ahead of the game in having a newly certified coastal plan.
Did you, I think my recollection is you're one of the first cities to get one recently certified under some of these new parameters, and also with a relatively model approach to sea level rise risk. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. I mean, up and down the coast of California, there haven't been too many communities that have really modernized their local coastal plans. And what's been happening statewide is a dialogue about not approaching this with a one size fits all for all coastal communities, because we're all different. We all have, different aged development along the coast, different environmental conditions along the coast. And so the novel approach is really a neighborhood-based approach, very specific to different neighborhoods in Pacifica. And we're the first to have this certified with the Coastal Commission to implement this neighborhoods-based approach. And I think we'll see more communities in the future striving for, the policies that are very specific, pertain to their particular circumstances, and just not a one size fits all approach. So in Pacifica, we have two particular neighborhoods that have older development. One has the Pacifica Pier and a seawall there. Another has some coastal protection and all our hotels. And the neighborhood's approach and policy that's novel that we developed are called special resiliency areas. And there are special policies that pertain to those areas that bring, again, clarity and certainty for those looking to remodel and redevelop.
So let me follow on, I guess, risky question. And first of all, it sounds like just any city out there that if you're listening to this podcast, you know people in other coastal communities, it sounds like they need to be listening to this podcast and probably follow up with a call to you, which we'll get to later, just to get their perspective and check out all the work you guys did. And I'm only familiar with a small element of it because of the chance I had to facilitate a community meeting. But I do recall that one of the kind of big areas of controversy that is beyond certainly Pacifica and is broadly in this debate is this is how you're addressing climate change, sea level rise. You used the term earlier, kind of integrating science into the strategy, which I presume integrates sea level rise projections and impacts of sea level rise. And I think the other term that we hear sometimes, at the risk of causing angst, is managed retreat as well. So how, I guess, all those factors, how does that play into the strategy that ultimately had to be considered in coming up with a local coastal land use plan, particularly as you look at what the California Coastal Commission's policy objectives are?
Right. Yeah. And thanks for that reminder, Ryder. It was fabulous to have you facilitating one of our most controversial and largest community meetings. And you saw the passion and just the core fundamental value difference that exists between private property ownership and interest and sort of regulatory authority over, that interest. And that's the fundamental core debate that is at the heart of local coastal plans and many other land use decisions for cities, but that makes it so passionate and so difficult. That's why Pacifica undertook 11 very robust public engagement meetings over the past year to get this across the finish line, to really have those tabletop dialogues, to explain very technical and complicated information as clearly as possible. And going back to the neighborhoods approach, each Pacifica's coastline, 6 miles of coastline is, not just one flat sandy beach like you might have in some other coastal communities. It varies from high bluff tops with, a geology that erodes very rapidly, to a wide sandy beach on the southern end, to everything in between, including a lot of protected open space along the coastline. And so the specific areas have to have different policies that apply. And then you wrap into that just the complexity of the Coastal Act, and property owners not maybe understanding the complex layers of that apply, why those Coastal Act provisions are important to California and to tourism and economic development for the, statewide and for each coastal community. And so, there's always the passion about, well, how can a regulatory agency tell me what I can and can't do with my house? So we had, in the local coastal plan, we had to address all of these difficult matters, these core value matters, and try to balance the perspectives of everyone and achieve Coastal Commission certification. And that process required very close collaboration with Coastal Commission staff, because they know the Coastal Act policies very well. They know what the Coastal Commission may or may not support. So it was a very intense process.
Intense and lengthy.
Yes.
And I guess I would, partly it also just sounds like perhaps harkening back to the prior analogy we were discussing. I was sharing about the housing element and builder's remedy. Like, the alternative of not having the local coastal plan is now you're still going to have to go to the California Coastal Commission. That's a far off and distant commission entity at the state level that's probably far less accessible than working with the city government along the coast, that if you're trying to get a project done. So I could well understand the incentive ultimately in getting some clarity around some of that, because lack of clarity doesn't exactly mean liberation. It just means you're subject to the additional regulatory oversight, direct regulatory oversight of the California Coastal Commission. You had referenced that this project took about 10 years, which seems like a big number, right? Maybe not in the scheme of for you and I in local government world, because Lord knows there's lots of projects that take 10 years. But when you embarked on this, did you anticipate, of course, how long you been the city manager there? You said it was 8 years now?
Yeah.
So this actually predated you. You arrived and this project had already started.
Yeah. I remember when I arrived, we were engaged in community outreach meetings about developing an early requirement to local coastal plans, which is our adaptation plan and feasibility study. And I remember attending, as the city manager, community meetings where folks had, no managed retreat signs and shouting and yelling, and other folks had, we need to retreat and not have any development in the coastal zone. And it was very controversial. And that was my introduction to this topic in Pacifica.
And so the topic has been on your horizon. I'm sure a top 3 or top 5 priority for you as directed by the council. So for your entire duration as city manager.
That's right.
Why did you expect it would take this long when you took the seat initially, or what tell me how this becomes an 8-year process, or a 10-year process, actually, as the case may be?
Yeah. No, and I think ideally it wouldn't take this long. There were fits and starts, and in intervening years, we had COVID.
Yeah, smack in the middle of that 10-year period.
Yeah, that's right. But I think all, city planners and city managers have learned that comprehensive land use planning documents do take many, many years. You want to do a significant amount of community engagement, public input throughout the process. And during that time, the requirements change too, and state legislation changes. You were also engaged in a comprehensive general plan update, which I mentioned, and so that and our housing element and specific plan and the local coastal plan, which all comprise our Plan Pacifica effort, were just a comprehensive and well-coordinated effort to modernize and lay the great groundwork for Pacifica moving forward. So I think some things can't be rushed, right? You slow down to go fast in a lot of cases, and
Right.
I think that's a dynamic here. When we talk about public engagement, there were delays there too, because in the last year we started a process that I estimated might be 5 community meetings, 5 public hearings and community meetings, and it ended up being 11, and rightfully so. It was necessary to do. This material is complicated. As I mentioned, folks are passionate about it, and it's really important. So it was necessary to take that time to achieve that. So no, I ideally it wouldn't have been 10 years, but that's what it took.
Yeah. Well, at some point you just say it is what it is. Like if you're going to do it right and you're not going to break backs in the course of making this thing happen because you want to make sure everybody's had a chance to be heard, and you navigate multiple city council elections and changes in city council and
Right.
any number of other factors, changing regulatory environment, a pandemic. I could well see how it would take that much time.
Right.
I'm trying to imagine too in your community. I mean, it's a small little community. What's your population?
About 38,000.
Yeah, and so you were doing all these major land use planning activities between your general plan, the specific plan, your housing element, and this local coastal plan all at the same time. I mean, if I were a resident, I'm just imagining the number of outreach meetings you must have had. I probably could have cruised from one outreach meeting to another and just fed myself on cookies and water bottles that you guys were handing out at community engagement meetings.
That's right.
That's a lot of engagement.
It is.
So, all right. So now, you have this plan that is, well, actually, let's talk real quick. So, I guess key to the success was collaborating with the California Coastal Commission. What does that look like? They're obviously expert staff. They know it better than anybody. I'm sure there's some attorneys that would argue that point, but from your perspective, they certainly know it and breathe it. What does collaboration with them look like? Is that bringing ideas to them early on? Is it approaching them with new models and getting their feedback? What does that work, or how does that work?
Yeah. So Coastal Commission staff knows the Coastal Act, but doesn't necessarily know our community. And the City Council and the Planning Commission both are in the position of having to balance interests of the community with maybe the one-size-fits-all perspective coastal staff may have. So the collaboration is really a two-way communication about what are our shared interests, and what's going to meet the requirements of the Coastal Act, which is, the ultimate test for the Coastal Commission decisions, and just meet our shared interests, and how can we creatively do that. And so that's where the idea of these special shoreline resiliency areas arose. And those are only in place, those policies are only in place for 20 years. And there's very specific implementation actions that we need to begin working on, which are very complex. And in a way, certification of the local coastal plan, although it was a long process, it's just the start. It's not the finish, because now we need to really focus on our coastal hazards and resiliencies program and our shoreline adaptation program. And those are very involved. There'll be lots of community engagement and input, working with different stakeholders in the more project-specific implementation of these policies for our coastline to adapt to climate change and sea level rise over the next 50 to 100 years. So it's important work, and it's just, that level of it is just beginning.
So I guess maybe explain that to me, like give me some brass tacks reality of that. Does that mean building up additional walls in the waterfront? Is it special drainage? Is it requiring new houses to be built on stilts. Tell me about those two additional follow-on actions that now come having certified the plan.
Right. So our coastal access program and coastal access and resilience program, I think is what it's called, is really like a capital improvement plan for the coast, and really focused on coastal access and amenities to improve public access to the coastline. And the shoreline adaptation planning process is, what needs to happen over a long period of time to anticipate conditions of nature 50 years from now.
Mm-hmm.
And, there's going to be lots of shoreline data monitoring, beach width monitoring, a lot of scientific studies, what's happening in particular neighborhoods in Pacifica, and how can we, over a long period of time, appropriately plan for strategies into the future. Some of that might be planned retreat, relocating infrastructure. Some might be nature-based solutions like building up sand dunes to help protect against coastal sea level rise and coastal erosion. Some might be like, we currently have going on an immense rebuilding process design of our Beach Boulevard seawall project, which protects critical infrastructure in this area and our downtown area. So it's a real amalgamation of all these different strategies, just to be strategic and comprehensive about how does a community need to adapt into the future.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's really the first of its kind for a city in California, if not around the country, where it's going to be a combination of all different kinds of strategies, not one size fits all. We need to move everyone, outside of the coastal zone, or vice versa. We need to armor everything. Those are not, there's just not one size fits all. It's going to have to be combined, solutions.
Well, I think that's partly to the point of one of the great things about local government, which is people collaborating and sharing. And it's not being braggadocious to say you should check out the Pacifica plan, but it is being practical to say, as one of the most recently adopted and certified with this novel approach, most of the coastal cities could benefit from at least taking a look at what was adopted by the California Coastal Commission, as at least understanding one particular approach to making this happen with some of the more conventional or modern day thinking from the Coastal Commission.
That's right. Yeah.
Okay. So we talked about this a little bit because we talked all about this local coastal land use plan. But simultaneously with that, we had Plan Pacifica, which was your general plan amendment process, right?
It was sort of the comprehensive sort of, viewing things holistically.
Okay.
The comprehensive general plan update, a particular specific planning process, the local coastal land use plan, and then element added to it was our housing element and rezonings, which, again, we just call that Plan Pacifica. Folks can go to planpacifica.org and read all about it as a comprehensive view about, we need the right building blocks for our future, both environmentally, socially, economically, et cetera, in Pacifica.
So Plan Pacifica was it was kind of the name for this bigger effort combining all of those simultaneous activities that were going on, usually each of which on its own is a kind of behemoth to tackle.
Right.
This idea of all these things lining up, partly, I assume this was a decision, either recommendation from you and decision by your council to say, let's do this all now because that all integrates. How did that kind of idea originate, and what was the hope of doing it all at once? Because I think some agencies might look at that and be like, oh my God, how can we possibly swallow this elephant? It's way too much to take down.
Yeah, I think it wasn't a very conscious all at once decision. I mean, we had the general plan update process, which was also ongoing and fits and starts for many years. And then during that time, it became very obvious that the local coastal plan and sea level rise adaptation strategies needed to be modernized into that plan. And then the new housing element phase came in, with all cities having to update their housing elements. And at the same time, we had a huge economic development effort in our Sharp Park area. And so the Sharp Park specific plan was an obvious decision to make. And so I think it was just a natural coalescing of all these huge planning efforts that we needed to package together. And they were, we needed to complete the general plan update before we did the housing element process. So we fell behind a little bit on the housing element process. And then the silver lining there is we also have to do the rezoning. So we'll be ahead of some cities by finishing our phase one rezoning, implementing our housing element. And, it's, if you could do these at different decades for cities, that's one approach, but
Right.
it can also, there can be also be a lot of great synergy in addressing new policies at the same time.
You must have probably had every department head in your operation at the table throughout this entire duration, given the expanse of the impact.
Yes, it's an interdepartmental process extensively, for sure. Yeah.
You also, a side note, you also built a brand new city hall in the middle of all this too, didn't you?
We did do that as well, and that's working out extremely well. So we're happy about that.
Congratulations on your new city hall.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, so you've done this all now. I assume the goal in organically resulting in doing this simultaneously is a more comprehensive, better integrated vision for land use in the city of Pacifica, and especially when you're up against a coastline, like we know what a premium land is and how that land is allocated and how it's developed is a huge area of concern. So all the more reason to be particularly thoughtful about it.
Yeah, that's right. And for those that don't know Pacifica, we have these incredible series of hills and valleys that come from the east to the coastline. And the most flat areas in Pacifica are in the coastal zone. So, those are the areas that are critical to our local economy largely. Residential areas up in the valleys, residential everywhere, but there's not any large flat commercial developable space in Pacifica. So the coastal zone is a big part of our economic engine.
Driving tourism, visits, restaurants, things of that nature.
That's right.
So Pacifica doesn't have a 5 auto brand auto mall.
We do not.
Okay.
We have amazing, mom and pop retail and restaurants, and just a great diverse coastline. Please come.
Yes. Well, having stayed in a hotel there, and I walked into a relatively famous restaurant whose name is eluding me right now, but they're known for, I think, their crab sandwich.
That's probably Nick's. Yeah, Nick's.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
It was a very tasty crab sandwich. So
right. Glad you had that.
Yeah. So what's coming out of all this now? So Plan Pacifica is adopted and done. What's coming down the pipeline?
Right.
You have big development coming to town?
Yeah, so I mentioned for the local coastal plan, we have some significant new implementation actions that we need to begin to continue to progressively look towards the future and what needs to happen in terms of adaptation and resilience in Pacifica. With the housing, not unlike a lot of coastal communities, not a lot of housing and development has occurred over the years. And with the housing element approval and, our Sharp Park specific plan adoption, then being clear and certain about policies, entitlement procedures for new hotels, mixed use development, of course, housing and affordable housing. That's all what's in Pacifica's future. As well, I should mention, while maintaining our local character, hopefully our local control, and our focus on the incredible environmental assets of our coastline and of our community, because that's a huge value in Pacifica. Our trails, hiking, mountain biking, you name it, beautiful place. We want to retain that quality, but we need to increase housing and affordable housing and our sales tax, et cetera, like all cities do.
I seem to recall that this last legislative cycle, or either last year's or this current year, there's been a pretty interesting debate going on between the Coastal Commission and YIMBY forces about land use development in the coastal zones, and YIMBY's generally encouraging it, and the California Coastal Commission being reticent to see more development in the coastal zones, particularly when they're dealing with climate change and managed retreat. Did I misread that, or is that and maybe you don't want to risk comment on that, but is that a tension that exists?
I think it is a tension that exists. I don't want to speak for either side on those issues. I do know the Coastal Commission, Coastal Commission staff publicly is saying that they support affordable housing projects. But yeah, it is a complex debate, and I don't want to, really mischaracterize aspects of that debate.
Well, you're an excellent city manager for avoiding the debate. I respect that. But I think what is interesting, or maybe to clarify, as you had to adopt your plan, you did allow for some additional density in the coastal zone as part of the housing element process in the land use plan. Is that correct?
Well, for our housing element, most of our opportunity sites are not in the coastal zone.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. But I mentioned our Sharp Park specific plan, our current and future downtown, which is in the coastal zone. It increases densities and heights.
Okay.
So yeah, that's an important aspect.
Yeah. It sounds like it was well balanced throughout the community.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Tell me, so we talked a lot about resident involvement in this entire process. I'm just curious, like, why was that important? I think it's maybe obvious, but I want to give you a chance to talk about that. And how did it ultimately shape some of these plans as you were preparing to work with the coastal commissions?
Yeah, no, it's a great question, and it's something that I'm passionate about. The Pacifica City Council is passionate about, is really robust public engagement. And I think the obvious part of that is we need to hear from property owners, from residents in Pacifica and their values, because they drive what the mission, vision, values are for the city council. But at the same time, there's sort of two-way communication and education that needs to happen, because there's this regulatory structure through the Coastal Act and the Coastal Commission that is very complex, and we need to communicate what it is, the constraints within which the city has to work to achieve that certification. So we knew it'd be complex, and as you've experienced, when you're talking about these really core value conflicts, you can't do this in 3-minute public comment at a public hearing meeting in the council chambers. And so you need tabletop breaking bread with neighbors and other community members who have a difference of opinion. And this applies to all of those complex issues: housing, as well as just regular local coastal planning. And so people can try to understand each other and really communicate face to face. And I think on these complex issues, that's the level of engagement you need to plan on. That's the time you need to build in to try to achieve understanding. Not everyone's going to like the outcome or the decision, but hopefully they'll feel that they were heard and understood during the process. And that's the goal. These days there's a lot of discussion about, folks may not be in agreement with the decision, and then therefore they may not agree to the process that was undertaken.
Right.
So we confront that in local government as well. But for most people, I think, they do understand and appreciate being heard, even though the decision isn't exactly what they would have decided. And this debate was very interesting because you had community members on different sides of the issue who agreed that the compromise solution that the council approved and the Coastal Commission approved was not the solution that they wanted to see. But coming at it from different perspectives on that property interest issue. And so one of my council members is fond of saying, if you're doing the right thing if there's a lot of people that are angry at you.
Well, I guess maybe that's a sign of a compromise when nobody's happy, right?
Yeah.
I was doing a bunch of public outreach work for a land use matter, and in working with the citizens, like that, one of the ultimate observations was like they weren't really thrilled with the pathway forward, but it was the least worst solution possible, right? Like,
Right.
so it at some point that becomes for some folks the reality of it, and really that has a lot to do not with a local control discussion, but a state mandated policy or issue that's been put down, particularly on cities, but could happen in the counties and special districts, to implement some legislative objective or goal or statewide policy. So, from my observation, it is a lot easier to cast a vote in Sacramento and divine a policy implementation that ultimately has to be rolled down to the cities to implement. And they're the ones face to face with residents, kind of delivering the news of like, yeah, this is the law. This is what we're trying to get done. You may hate this law. You can talk to your assembly member or your state senator or the governor about this, but fundamentally, this is the law, the edicts we've been given as a local government agency to implement. And here's the policy options we have in order to stay on the right side of the law.
Right.
And I just see that as a constant kind of battle that public agencies are facing as they go about their communications work, trying to implement policies and achieve state mandate compliance on things that at least some portion of their community, whether it's the majority or just a significant but vocal minority, have strong objections to.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it is a theme that really reverberates between all of the different levels of government, from local to county, from local to state, from state to federal. We're seeing that, and it's one thing that at years of more than 34 years in local government now, one thing I appreciate so much is the difficult job that local elected officials have. The decisions they need to make. I mean, city manager's job is difficult, staff's job is difficult, but our council members have to make tough decisions, in front of their constituents, people they live with day in and day out in the community. It's tough stuff. But there's usually a path forward, and that's what we strive for.
Yeah. I think you can get a lot of grace by being transparent and, frankly, just being open about good intentionality behind it. Not that good intentions are necessarily justified for horrible, ultimately policy decisions, but you have to start from a place of trust, and good intentions is a critical factor in that.
Yeah, that's absolutely true.
I want to slide in one more question before we start to wrap up here in the conversation. But what do you expect? How do you expect the plans to change or develop in the next 5 years for the local coastal land?
Yeah, I think that you're going to see, because of the state law requirement for communities to have to update their local coastal plans in the next less than a decade now. I think you're going to see more of the neighborhoods approach that ice has been broken by Pacifica's plan. The Coastal Commission, I think, more understands the need for neighborhoods-based views and policies that make sense if we're to holistically achieve visions for communities. Reasonable development, coastal protection, et cetera, more housing, and move communities forward. So you're going to see a lot of more specific work really catered to each community in their plans. And the Coastal Commission staff is going to have to get into those weeds for each community and understand that. And that'll be one change from the past, and a positive change, I think. It balances, that what we were just talking about, that sort of hammer from state regulatory viewpoint and local control, bounces that out. And I think you'll see a lot of science is evolving. So you'll see a lot of application of new science, new learning about sea level rise, nature-based solutions for adaptation will be a prominent implementation. A lot of the grant funding resources are focused on nature-based solutions already. So that'll continue as well.
Do you foresee those continuing in light of state budget constraints? Has there been any pullback on that you're aware of?
The current Proposition 4 is putting quite a bit of funding into that. So hard to tell for future years coming, for sure. And this year, of course, there is some clamping down on the state funding resources. But I think the trend will generally be in that direction, and for the betterment of our coastal communities and our coastline.
Interesting. Well, it's going to be a flurry of activity for this. And you said this legislation has been adopted or is on its way to being adopted?
The one that's going
to force kind of addressing these local coastal plans sooner.
No, it has been adopted. The number of it is escaping me, so I don't want to misquote it. But it has been adopted.
All right. I'm sure city managers that are living in coastal zones are well aware of this better than I am. So my compliments to them for doing that. All right. So obviously you've been pioneering on this front, and congratulations on the certification for your local coastal land use plan. I am confident that people in the local government world will be interested in your efforts in Pacifica and the outcome of that, or as they peruse the Plan Pacifica website and learn more about all the plans that have been developed, will be interested in how you got there. What's the best way, Kevin, for people to get a hold of you?
Yeah. Email is probably the best way. Woodhouse at pacifica.gov. And then the Plan Pacifica website is planpacifica.org. So lots of information there. So please, anyone, reach out. I love to talk about this stuff.
Great. We'll add that to the description as well, in the description of this podcast. And that's today's report. My thanks to Kevin for joining us. From the whole PublicCEO team and myself, Ryder, Todd, Smith, thank you for your time. We hope you learned something new and inspiring that will help you in your public service. Remember, PublicCEO has a daily newsletter that is free to those who sign up at PublicCEO.com. Thank you for tuning in to this edition of the PublicCEO Report. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider subscribing across all of our platforms so you never miss out on this great content. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, YouTube, Spotify, and Amazon Music.